here today to help answer any general or technical questions that you may have. But before we get started with today's event, let's get familiar with our webinar platform, RingCentral. To the right of the video window here, you'll see our interactivity panel, your key to connection and engagement within today's webinar. Use this panel to react to speaker info and send chat messages to your fellow attendees. Additional surveys and polls will appear in the polls tab. We got a couple polls for you today, so you will see those on the right. If you have a question about today's content or the platform itself, feel free to drop any inquiries into the Q&A tab on the right. We will have today's speakers address questions during today's Q&A section, and CLO staff will be on standby to answer anything about our webinar platform. Once today's event is complete, you'll be redirected to a short post-event survey, so please let us know what we can do to make our webinars even better. Thanks again for joining us today. And today we have Cheryl Jackson and Leah Clark from GP Strategies to tell us more about upskilling and reskilling in times of change. Take it away.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our session today, Adapting to the Unknown, Strategies for Upskilling and Reskilling in Times of Change. And I want to acknowledge that the title is a little bit scary and our image is a bit foreboding. But I assure you that as Cheryl and I move through the session today, we hope to really demystify upskilling and reskilling, particularly against the backdrop of so much change, especially generative AI, digital disruption, and shed some light on how to approach upskilling and reskilling in a way that is thoughtful, strategic, and takes into account how to really keep humans at the center of your upskilling and reskilling agenda. Before we get much further in, let me introduce myself. I'm Leah Clark, the practice lead for the leadership division, and I'm delighted that Cheryl Jackson is here with me today. She is the practice lead for organizational design and change management. Now, just a little bit of information about how we're going to be running the session. You might see me looking over here for a moment. That's because I have the screen up here with the slides that I will be moving through on behalf of Cheryl and myself. And then I'll be able to keep an eye on the poll and the chat over here. So rest assured, if you see me moving like this, it's because I'm trying to navigate between what we want to share and what we want to hear from you. Because I know Cheryl and I are both aligned in the fact that these sessions are always so much better for the input that we get from all of you in the polls or in your chat. So we really encourage you over the course of the time that we have together to share some of your thoughts on this particular topic. So thanks for coming along with us. Now, we are going to talk a little bit today about the backdrop against which upskilling and reskilling is such a hot topic. And naturally, that backdrop has everything to do with technology and AI in particular. Cheryl is going to take you through a very thoughtful way of anchoring your upskilling and reskilling strategy. And then I'll come in at the end and talk about keeping humans at the center of your approach. So we've got a full agenda and we are looking forward to our time with you. And to do that, to bring you in, we want to start by asking you this question. It's a question that we posed in research that we conducted at GP Strategies about AI and leadership. And what we would love to know is, to what extent do you agree that AI will dramatically or significantly change the organization? So to what extent do you agree? Are you not sure? Do you disagree, strongly disagree? Are you neutral on it? So to what extent do you agree that AI will dramatically or significantly change the organization? So taking a look now at our responses, I don't see them popping up here. Cheryl, are they building in real time or not? Looks like they're not, but I'm going to go ahead and put my response in here. What do we have in terms of results? Jared, can you see what's coming in?
We have 47% so far strongly agree. About 42% are agreeing, and then it goes down from there. 5% neutral, 2% disagree, 2% strongly disagree, a few unsure.
All right, there we go. Yeah. I can see them coming in now. Thanks, Cheryl. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I'm seeing exactly what you're seeing. A lot agree and strongly agree. A few unsure. Only 2 votes there disagreeing. I'd love to know who those individuals are. We'll have a chat after the call because I'd love to know your perspective, and maybe it's the dramatic or significantly changed word. But yeah, what we're seeing here, what you're responding in our poll, is absolutely consistent with what we heard in our research, right? AI is transforming the world, and people are embracing it more and more each and every day. I likely don't need to tell many of you that. It's not a distant concept. It's here and has been here for a while, whether we're fully aware of it or not. AI has been all around us. Yeah.
Apologies for interrupting. We're still seeing your poll on one half and your screen is really small. There we go.
Okay. How's that? Is that better?
It is.
Okay. How about now?
Looks great.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for letting me know that. Just feel free to let me know if anything else seems a little off. As you can see, technology is changing the world, sometimes not for the better, and sometimes with some blips and some little bumps along the way. But certainly, again, not a distant concept. AI is here. And it's changing not just the way we show up in our personal lives, but impacting the world of work. Incredibly, we see that 88% of employees say that they are accepting or embracing AI at work, actively embedding it into their professional routines. And so this is really prompting this significant realization. It's not just a trend, it's changing our work landscape. In fact, 66% of individual contributors and 72% of leaders we surveyed say that AI will dramatically or significantly change their organizations. Now, how are folks using it? Well, in a variety of ways, from automating repetitive tasks to creating content, distilling massive amounts of information to glean data-driven insights. There are certainly many ways in which folks across organizations are leveraging AI, including chatbots, maybe not the most popular way to use AI, but the point is clear. This is not something that is a distant concept or just used in social media or in our personal lives. More and more each and every day integrated into the world of work. Now, one of the things that's not on this slide, but I did want to comment on, is the trends that we're seeing with respect to how people feel about AI, the sentiment, if you will, that individuals and leaders are expressing. And that sentiment is moving almost as rapidly as the technology itself. In 2024, which feels like a distant memory, in the early months of 2024, when we asked questions about how people were feeling about AI, the words that we got from both individuals and leaders alike were a lot more cautious, even a little bit negative. Words like nervous, unsure, ethical considerations were all at the top of the list. Now, as time has gone on, the level of enthusiasm has really grown. When we asked similar questions in our research, we saw words like excitement and innovation. Both leaders and individual contributors alike are increasingly seeing the potential and the opportunity and expressing a sense of enthusiasm for what the technology can mean to their lives and to the roles that they play. Now, to be really clear, while many have expressed enthusiasm for AI's potential, there's still some persistent fear, particularly fear about job loss. So 38% of employees and 42% of leaders worry that AI will lead to job elimination, with additional percentages in that pink in that neutral zone. So folks are still shaky and they're looking for guidance. They want to know that their leaders, that they have a plan here, but they aren't convinced that they do. There is a profound lack of confidence in senior leaders' ability to lead a successful generative AI initiative. So you can see here, 41% of individual contributors said, I'm not sure that my leadership team is ready to lead. And when we asked, well, okay, are they ready to lead ahead of the competition? The confidence dipped even further. Leaders have slightly more confidence in their senior team's ability to lead, but they too seem to demonstrate a gap in their own level of confidence that their organization is equipped to lead successfully into an AI digitally disrupted future. Now, I want to acknowledge that organizations are still exploring which AI investments to make and the fast pace of the development may be somewhat contributing to these numbers. Nevertheless, there is work to do here, and folks are just not sure. They're a bit concerned that their leadership teams can successfully tackle AI. And one area of particular concern, and the focus for this webinar, is upskilling and reskilling. So when we specifically probed on this issue, the topic of today's session, we found that only 42% of individual contributors say that their leaders can address upskilling, and 34% say that they are ready to address reskilling. Now, leaders give themselves slightly higher marks in this area. Perhaps they have greater transparency into what those upskilling and reskilling plans are. But even with this population, there's work to do around upskilling and reskilling. And so we're excited to be chatting about that today. There's an opportunity here. Now, why are these numbers so low? What gives? What's in this? Well, first of all, there is a lack of understanding. What do you mean by upskilling and reskilling? I'm not quite sure I understand the terms. They sound a little painful, and I don't know how to address what I don't know about. So there may be a little bit of noise in the numbers associated with just not understanding what the terms are or how to approach it. For some organizations, they don't have a clear strategy. They are not sure how to tackle it. Perhaps they're waiting for the technology to settle, which I think is a risky gamble because the technology is continuing to change and morph, and it likely won't settle for some time. So they don't have a strategy because they're not quite pursuing it yet. Or maybe they have a strategy and they just haven't cascaded it down through the organization. So there are a confluence of factors that I think are going into these numbers and creating that lack of confidence that reskilling and upskilling is something that organizations can tackle. For others, they say, well, I get that I need to do it, but I don't know how to go about skill mapping. I don't have a budget for this, and I'm resource constrained. And then last but not least, for some, there is this balance between I want to keep people excited and enthusiastic about AI and tell them that there's no threat or minimal threat to you. You still contribute to the organization, but oh, by the way, here's a really large upskilling and reskilling plan. So balancing that message and keeping the enthusiasm around upskilling and reskilling while also alleviating the fears, I think, is a fine line to walk. Nevertheless, this is not an area where organizations can hang back and take a wait and see approach. Because while confidence may be low, this needs to happen across so many organizations. The beating of this drum is only getting louder and louder. And you can see that in some of the data here. So McKinsey says that 87% of companies are already feeling the pain of these skill gaps. And the pace at which skills are needing to be developed, you can see the World Economic Forum data here, is profound. 85 million jobs, 85 million, could be displaced by technology by 2030, but 97 million new roles will emerge. Organizations must keep up with this trend. You can see here that the average LinkedIn member has seen skills needed for their job change by 25% over the last 8 years, and it's going to reach at least 65% due to AI. So despite the fears and the concerns and the uncertainty, this is not something that organizations should take a wait and see or hang back approach to. And then last but not least, according to that McKinsey report, 92% of companies plan to increase their investment over the next 3 years, but only 1% of leaders consider their companies to be mature in AI deployment. So you can see whether it's McKinsey data or some of the data that we're sharing, there is a profound need and a lack of confidence. So now what? I did a really good job, hopefully, of teeing up the challenge and the context, but what do we do now? Are organizations just out of luck? Do we sit where we are and say, I don't know how to begin? Well, certainly that's not something that we believe. We believe that you can take a thoughtful and strategic approach towards upskilling. And this is where Cheryl comes in to maybe turn the slightly murky picture around and part the clouds to share with you what I think is a really thoughtful and strategic way of aligning upskilling and reskilling to strategy. So Cheryl, with that, I'd love to hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Leah. You know, AI is not something that we've just started talking about. As it's making its way into organizations, we've really been preparing for this digital revolution, the AI revolution, for many, many years now. And with that comes a lot of excitement, fear, all of the emotions that we've been building up over time with anticipation. And we're all entering into this with our own biases toward that. Are we excited? Are we fearful? And so, as you're working with your workforce, it's crucial to remember that everyone is coming together with kind of this baggage of emotions around it. It's not a fresh slate. It's not something new that's just kind of popping up that we can all kind of direct those emotions. So, as a change management guru here, I really like thinking about the people side. What are we doing to prepare our organization? So, you'll hear me chime in with that quite frequently, but I want to take a step back and just focus really on the organizational readiness for upskilling and reskilling around AI. So, as tempting as it is to just jump right in and say, we've got these new skills, we have to prepare our workforce, we need to take a step back and say, what does this look like for our organization as a whole? So on this next slide, you'll see our org design model. This is something you've probably seen models like this where we have this system of performance where everything needs to be aligned to ensure that we have high performance across our organization. And it all starts in the middle with establishing our strategy and organizational capabilities. And with AI, it's no different. So on the next slide here, you'll see how we have our artificial intelligence and technology, and we need to see how that fits in with our strategy. When we say, as an organization, what does this mean for us? Are we going to use it to serve customers? Is it going to be an integral part of our organization and how we move into the next generation? What does it look like? How in depth are we going here with this? So, once we have a clear strategy for how we as an organization as a whole want to align with this, the next step is to identify what organizational capabilities are critical for achieving that strategy. So an example may be here, rapid AI prototyping. Is that something that we're going to need to do to be successful, to be more, what is it that we need to do better than others in order to be successful and achieve this strategy? That's what our organizational high level capabilities are. So here's some examples around AI and how those capabilities could fit into our strategy. Once we have those capabilities, then we can start looking at that next step and say, how does that translate into impact to roles? What do our people need to do differently? What is the impact to processes? How do our processes need to react? How do we need to communicate with each other? What needs to change in order to support this connection with AI and how that aligns with our strategy? And then we have specific talent all the way down here at the next step. How do our individuals need to adjust? What capabilities do we need to bring on board from an individual talent perspective? And that can start with assessment. What do we have now? But all of this impacts our talent development strategy. So, as learning leaders, as folks in the talent dev space, we know that our talent development strategy has got to be aligned with our overall organizational strategy. And that means getting a seat at the table, making sure that you're involved in those conversations. And as those strategies are being developed, what does that mean for our people? Oftentimes we get, hey, we need to upskill in AI. Hold on, how are we using this? What does it mean for our organization? It's our responsibility to take a step back and say, slow down. We need to do some things first before we can even start talking about what learning platform we're going to bring in and how we're going to start badging people and how we're going to get people upskilled, how we're going to assess for current skills. What are we assessing for? So all of these steps, I just wanted to make sure it's crystal clear that if you're thinking about the business strategy and how this aligns, yes, you're on the right track. We have got to know where we are as an organization first. So on the next slide, I want to talk about 5 ways to anchor your skilling strategy to the work. First of all, we've got you've got to deconstruct your job roles. As you know what direction we're going as an organization and you start to look at impact to those roles, sometimes those roles are going to change. If we're taking customer service roles, for example, and they're servicing clients and asking questions, and now they've got more data sources at their fingertips. They're using chat bots. They're not getting phone calls anymore. You're thinking about the transformation through the years. They're not getting phone calls anymore, but it's all online. How is that going to impact their skills? What are they going to have to do differently? How does it impact their job role? So if you already have a very thorough job analysis of each of your job roles, this can be very helpful. Now that you have your AI direction, how does this impact those core responsibilities? The fundamental aspects of their job, how are they going to change? If you don't have a thorough job analysis, that has got to be one of the first things that you do to determine what their skills are for their current roles, their responsibilities, and all of those various aspects. Then we take a look at those real world skills. So we're not talking high level, behind the scenes AI. What are they actually having to do different to interface with this new technology, with the new reporting that's available, data that's available? How does this impact their actual roles, and what does that look like? We can often get carried away with all the skills and all the options available to us and say everybody needs to know so many aspects. We think about coding and behind the scenes effort that may not be applicable to their specific job. So what are those real world skills? And then leverage AI for those insights. So we talk a lot about how our role is going to change by using AI, but as learning leaders and development specialists, we can also use AI to guide our conversations, guide the development of our talent development strategy. What does this mean for us? What skills are relevant? And I'm going to talk a little bit about different tools that are available. And this can really direct and guide how we develop and move into the next phase and how we build our talent development strategy. So AI has a lot of insights available to us to do our jobs easier and better as we're helping others define what their jobs look like. Embracing flexibility. This one is really funny because AI is all about new, changing, different. We're not quite ready for that poll. Thank you. Embracing the different, and our strategy has to adapt and be flexible to the fact that things are constantly changing. So it's a very interesting place that we're in, where we're designing for a future that we haven't even really fleshed out yet. We don't necessarily know what that looks like. So whatever our org design looks like, what our communication plans, our skills frameworks, all of these must be flexible enough to bring in new needs as they arise, as we're developing as a society around this new technology that is changing at such a fast pace. And then focusing on work outputs. So we often talk about responsibilities, but what is it that is the actual output of these roles? What are we asking them to accomplish that's different than what they were accomplishing before? And then we can work backwards to say, how are they going to get that? They don't need to do it the same way they've always done it. What new opportunities are available in order to get the outputs that we're looking for? So as we're defining the strategy up top, it's going to drive what outputs we're looking for in the back end. So I'll take a pause and let us flip over to our poll here. And I'll also
there's a question that came up. I'll flip to the poll, and perhaps folks can answer the poll. But there was a question that I thought you'd love to jump in on. So Taruna said, curious about where does recognition of prior learning, existing skills, figure in the skilling strategy? What I have found is that we often rush to retrain, reskill, or retool without pausing to ask, what do our people already know? And I just wondered if you wanted to jump in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And we do talk about assessing your current workforce a little bit later in this presentation, but that is such a critical step. You don't need to retrain everyone. You don't need to upskill everyone. You need to know what skills do I need for the future and where we're going? And then you need to assess that talent to say, where are we today on these specific skills? But oftentimes we skip that first part that says, what do we really need? And we jump into assessing or retraining. So we still need to know what that future state looks like. So that's a critical step that in my experience often gets overlooked because it feels like, okay, we all know where we're going. But as an organization, we might not. We might be going in different directions. So assessing that talent is critical. Otherwise, you're going to start training folks for skills that, one, they may not necessarily need. And then also they may already have, which is going to result in a loss of trust and a drop in morale and engagement. We want to keep our workforce engaged through this whole process to know that while we're looking at it, the organization as a whole, I still see you as an individual. I recognize where you are, and I'm going to work with those capabilities and those current skill levels. So AI can be very powerful. There's different tools and resources, some of the skills platforms, Degreed, Credly, can help with the badging of that. People can go through and do assessments to see where they are now and start with that base level. And then that can be fed into your LMS to determine what the starting point is. So if you're upskilling folks on cloud capability, you know where they're starting, and then that can direct them to the training level that needs to be right for them, as opposed to everybody has to take foundations of cloud. And I've been working in cloud for 10 years. I've seen it grow from nothing. I don't need to start at that level. Meanwhile, others who don't even know what cloud means may be jumping in too early, and they're not getting the fundamentals of that. So you've got to have a great tool for assessment early on. It's
That's
absolutely
great.
key.
Yeah, thanks. And while you answered that question, it looks like we have our poll responses in. I'm sure you can see those. So just let me know if you want to comment on those or move ahead.
I was talking too much. We'll go ahead and move ahead. All right. Okay, so one thing that I haven't talked through, and I think it might also align to that question and maybe another one that I saw in here, but culture is so critical for success or failure of any upskilling or reskilling initiatives. So here are just some cultural characteristics that you need to be aware of as you're developing. I think one of the questions that I saw was, is this all planning part before looking at individuals to assess? Yes, you have to plan appropriately. Otherwise, none of your initiatives are going to be successful because you haven't looked at the end and where we're going before you jump right in and start saying, yay, we're going to upskill everyone. If you don't have learning readiness as an organization, if you don't have habits that are going to support this learning culture that you're trying to put in for this ever-changing, flexible world that we're moving into, then it's not going to be sustainable, and people will get upskilled and then not use them. Leaders won't know how to support the use of these new skills that they have. People will check the box and then move on and say, we always do this. It never sticks. So what does your culture say about upskilling, reskilling, and having a continuous growth mindset? Culture, continuous learning. So key elements that you want to consider, I'll let you just kind of take a look at this. And I do think the question was asked earlier about getting the slides, and I do believe you will. So you can look into detail on this at your leisure, but please do not underestimate the impact of culture. Okay, it looks like we've got was that backwards? Okay. So how do you assess when so much is unknown as technology is continuously changing? And we've got to assess our talent now, but we also know that those skills may be adjusting. Our roles may be changing. Our structure may be impacted by AI and technology. We may not need the specific roles that we have now, and they may look very different in the future. So we've got a couple of steps here for you. The first two, we can go and put those up, are to really stay ever aligned to your strategy and impact on those defined roles. Talked about that quite a bit, but we've got to have a clear look and definition around what these roles are. So as we see adjustment, we can adjust those roles as well. So those are foundational and fundamental aspects. On this next step here is really the meat of assessment, which I was kind of touching on a moment ago. Step number 3 is to use a multidimensional capability assessment. So a blended assessment tool. Now, I talked about some of the really technical assessments that you can use as you're trying to understand what are our specific capabilities around AI, specific aspects of technology, things like that that are pretty technical, pretty heavy. That's not something that you want to have a manager or a peer look at. That's going to be a self-assessment based on my past, my experience. It can be a self-assessment or actual like in one of these tools that asks very specific technical questions, and you can get defined answers based on these specific skills. There are a lot of those assessments available through assessment providers and creators, and also through a number of these learning platforms and systems that help you evaluate where to start with your skills training and development. And they've also established the taxonomies and the ontologies that are going to help align the language around these various skills. So if I'm using a word in my organization to describe a skill and they're using a different word, we can align those and know that we're speaking about the same skill. Or if a training that I took in another system uses different words, they can connect with where does that put me on various skills. So in terms of technical training, I would certainly look into or technical assessment. I would look and see what's available through these various assessment providers and skills development platforms. Now, another way to assess talent is to take a look at, and go ahead and jump to the next one, Leah, because they're kind of connected, but assessing learnability. So as we're facing kind of this changing future, and we don't really know how it fits into our strategy yet, we haven't had that well defined, a great way to assess your current talent is to say, what about these competencies and these critical characteristics that are going to determine if our organization is even capable of developing or learning these skills? Are we ready? Do we have the curiosity, the adaptability, the flexibility to be able to jump into this new world that we're in, to be able to learn these skills? Do they want to do that? Are they able? Do they have those fundamental competencies? So when we're assessing at this level that is not quite so technical, a great way to do that is manager or peer assessment. We've got these competencies and we are asking questions of others. Where have you seen this exhibited? How do they experience this in the workplace? Have you seen them perform these specific behaviors? And that is a great way to assess some of those underlying competencies that are going to help you know if they're prepared and if they're going to be able to upskill or reskill. That's also going to help you define your talent development strategy. Is this something that we're going to be able to develop reskill, or is it something that we're going to need to bring in talent to be able to fill these roles? And where are those gaps in our organization? Which leads us to running this iterative gap analysis. So as we're assessing our current talent and we have our future in sight, we can create this heat map of critical roles and critical areas to determine, do we have the capability that we need, that we're going to need to move into the future? What do those gaps look like? And what is our strategy going to be for closing that gap? Upskilling our current talent, bringing in new talent, some combination of the two. And as those skills fluctuate, we can continue to update those skill maps to really hone in on what we're looking at from a talent perspective. So I'll take a pause there. Any questions come in for that we need to address real quick before moving on?
No, I would just say, I'm seeing some chatter for sure about upskilling and reskilling is necessary regardless of AI. And that absolutely is true. And a lot of what Cheryl is talking about are best practices associated with reskilling and upskilling, even if AI were not a thing, but it is, and it is certainly an accelerant. So full acknowledgement that, Cheryl, a lot of what you're talking about, your strategy, your approach, applies in any context, but especially in the context of AI. There has been a heightened focus on reskilling and upskilling. So Karina, just wanted to acknowledge that comment. And also, absolutely right, the World Economic Forum has also emphasized cognitive skills, especially for leaders, at the top of the list, and still human skills, blended with some data that they also shared about the rapid need for technology skills within the next 5 years. So agree, it is a combination of those human skills, an emphasis on cognitive skills that have risen to the top of the list. And if you dig into some of that data, they also do emphasize the rapid increase in need for tech skills in the coming years. But wanted to just acknowledge that a little bit as we move through the session.
Yeah, thank you. And as I approach my final slide here, I mentioned earlier that AI is definitely impacting employee ways of working, but it can also be used behind the scenes to define our skills, skill needs, and continuous development plans. And as capability needs shift, that AI can help maintain a skilling architecture that really underlays our development plan and helps us keep it relevant. So just want to touch a few on these here. First of all, clustering algorithms can allow AI to group similar skills, identify which ones appear together, and highlight those natural relationships between skills. And some great tools to do that. Really graph-based AI models shine here. So SkyHive and Lightcast, two examples that we've used to cluster some of those skills and identify those ontologies. The AI-driven synonym detection, so normalizing and standardizing, is really about identifying and consolidating different terms that may refer to the same skill. This doesn't sound like a big deal until you're trying to marry up different skills, and maybe you have a competency framework or a skill framework that you're using, and you're getting trained in one that has a different model. Which ones are compatible? We've worked with many clients who are trying to align their skills with a new LMS platform or a new assessment or something like that. And this ability to normalize and standardize is critical. Workday Skills Cloud, and again, Lightcast, other great ways to do that. Degreed, Eightfold, .ai, really great tools to normalize language, remove duplicated skills, and then also map to taxonomies like ESCO or ONET. And then in terms of tracking emerging skills, when we're looking into the unknown and how quickly things are adapting and changing, we have to stay relevant. And a really exciting way we're seeing AI utilized is to scan job postings and industry reports, academic publications, and even current projects that folks are working on to see what skills are they developing and gaining in that project, so that we can assess and keep a record of skills that folks are developing. This is a really emerging area right now that is so powerful, not just for AI, but using AI to develop our talent strategy and keep it relevant and fresh. You'll see Lightcast and SkyHive really coming up here in many of these areas. But LinkedIn Economic Graph is also a really great way. And then as a skilling architecture becomes more mature, AI can support its continuous improvement by maybe detecting anomalies and inconsistencies in data, like mislabeled skills or outdated terms. Credly provides the verifiable credential-based validation that is really powerful and can keep those updated. So just some great ways to think about using AI in your development plans.
All right. So Cheryl, while I jump into the next section here, I know there are some questions that came up in the chat that I'm keeping an eye on relative to tools and platforms. So I wonder if you want to jump into the chat and provide your thoughts there as we move into the back end of the session. Great. Okay. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I get to bring up the back end of the session here to talk about how to support the strategy, the approach, the thoughtfulness that Cheryl has mapped out for you, keeping a human-centric approach. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about are best practices, again, regardless of whether or not that upskilling or reskilling strategy is being prompted by changes as a result of AI, and more how you can keep a human-centric approach in your strategy, in your upskilling and reskilling plan, regardless of the genesis of that plan or why that plan is something that is good and necessary for your organization. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump in before we get into the human component of this and how you can keep a human-centric focus as you implement an upskilling and reskilling strategy. I would just love to know, which of the following best describes how your people feel when they hear the words upskilling, reskilling? Are they like, hey, bring it on, I want to learn more? Or like, oh, I need to put that somewhere on my calendar. Maybe it's like, I think this is one of those HR initiatives and I pretend to understand it, but I don't really. Maybe they're excited, but also panicked by the bots and the implications. And then are some saying like, is this just a fancy way of saying that my job is changing or disappearing? So I'm going to take a look here on my computer and see on my laptop here. It looks as though a lot of you are going with the UGG, not another thing to put on my calendar. Or is this a fancy way of saying my job is changing or disappearing? A lot of B's and E's, which really nicely sets up the case for the fact that we need, or I think, a reframe here, and we need to address this very real issue, which is that upskilling and reskilling, it sounds painful. It sounds something that is really just a veil for your job is going to change. Because when you say upskill or reskill, people do get nervous. It does sound, for some, like a code word for you're not good enough or your job might be on the line. And
Your
at a
screen
time,
here. Thank you.
yeah, can you see my slide, Cheryl?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Little bit of feedback. Yeah. So, and at a time when trust is low in many organizations, it can feel to some like the company is filtering the truth, just sort of quietly reshuffling roles behind the scenes or having bots replace people. And so to calm those fears, I do think some of what is required is a reframe around what upskilling and reskilling means. So this isn't about fixing people, it's about investing in them. And it's not about replacement, but it's about growth. And it's not about panic, it's about progress. And in order to do that, we do advocate for a human-centric approach. So starting with how you communicate, being really clear about your intentions and sharing the why behind your upskilling and reskilling strategy, not just the what and the how. Involve your people in those conversations, involve them in the process. Ask them what they want to learn and what they see as emerging or critical skills so that they can see themselves in the future and in the vision that you're crafting, because they're more likely to lean in. They want that clarity and feedback. Engage in discussion with them. So share what you're looking at, share what reskilling means to you, what your expectations are, what your vision is. Be clear about the time frame, the expectations of them, and then invite their feedback, invite conversation. We know that regular constructive feedback, really as it relates to any large scale change, of which upskilling and reskilling strategies can be one, goes better when folks know where they stand, how they're progressing through your expectations, and it will decrease their anxiety and increase the degree to which they are motivated and engaged. So clarity and feedback, transparency, involvement in the conversation, help them understand not only the what, but why is this important. And then really listening as a leader. We talk about active listening or deep listening so that you understand their fears, their aspirations, their strengths. things that you might be listening for that wouldn't be obvious if you weren't really paying attention and locked in on their input and soliciting and taking really to heart what is important to them. Why am I waxing poetic about this so much? Because we know that learning journeys are something that, if shaped together, are much more likely to take root than if they're pushed down from leaders or from human resources without that collaboration and involvement and input from your team. So human-centric approach, clarity and feedback, deep listening to your people, and then empowerment. Continuation of this theme. We want people to feel as though, we don't just want them to feel, we want them to have agency in their learning path. When we do that, we know that they're more engaged. So give them options. Respect to the extent you can while still moving at pace, their pace. Involve them in how that reskilling is going to get done. It's not just about offering training or pushing down training. It's really about helping people to own their own development. And that is a best practice with respect to career development and growth and development, regardless of artificial intelligence. I will say that as it relates to empowerment, absolutely, equipping individuals with options associated with formal or traditional learning is key. Empowerment, though, also comes from giving them the option to experience, in this case, artificial intelligence and the tools associated with it. So what we saw in our data is that, leaders are encouraging innovation. They're somewhat supportive with their resources. If we can start to migrate that encouragement and the resources provided, I think we can help our people feel even more empowered in the use of these tools. But perhaps most important for me is the opportunity to shift that last column where we can encourage leaders to ask for feedback way more often than they are right now. So there's an opportunity to provide that clarity and feedback, to listen to our team members as we involve them and garner their input in our upskilling and reskilling strategy. And then there certainly is that opportunity to empower them, give them options, give them tools, give them resources, and do a better job at asking for and getting feedback. A human-centric approach also means focusing on relationships. So when the learning is happening with a supportive network, when there are mentors and a team-based approach, it is much more likely to stick and be something that folks are less fearful of, and more something that becomes a part of a supportive culture of learning. So that includes identifying role models who are part of your upskilling and reskilling. So again, we break down that barrier of, this is only something that will be done if you are deficient or not good enough, and shift that thinking. No, this is something that we do to get better, to grow, to learn, to respond to what is changing in the world around us, very much fueled by technology, but also fueled by other dynamics as well. And then last but not least, again, Cheryl is here with me as my partner and an expert in change, because what we're talking about here is a change effort, and it is personal. Some folks will feel excited about it. Others will feel anxious or agitated. A human-centric approach gives space for individuals to have that wide range of emotions, to acknowledge those challenges, validate feelings, and then be present as a leader during the ups and downs of learning something new. So I am keeping an eye on our clock here, and we want to leave a little bit of time for questions. But before we do that, I've got one more slide that I wanted to just take you through, because I know we shared with you the thoughtful, strategic way of approaching an upskilling and reskilling plan. Cheryl did a phenomenal job of that. And we talked a little bit about how to keep humans at the center, how to take that human-centric approach. But I do want to offer just a few more things that leaders specifically can do to help in really any upskilling and any reskilling effort. First of all, encouraging that career self-advocacy. Let people raise their hand and say, here's where I want to grow. Because we don't want to push training down on people. We really want to pull them through their own growth journey. Provide role growth and formal learning, not just those formal events, but opportunities to learn on the job through stretch assignments, through mentors. We know that people want to learn and grow. Yes, they're interested in growth that includes moving up the ranks or a promotion. But what we also know based on our career research is that they're really interested in learning and expanding their skills, even in their role. As long as they are growing and developing, they're more likely to stick with you. So providing that growth and development in both informal and formal ways is a surefire way to engage and retain thoughtfully. Look for those patterns or trends. Where do you notice from a skill perspective people are getting stuck? Or what keeps coming up time and time again? Those moments give you very clear direction around where to channel the energy associated with your training and your development plans. Look at the life cycle of the employee, opportunities, onboarding, changing roles, maybe a merger or an acquisition, an org change rather. Those could be really key moments to focus on upskilling. And then last but not least, this has been a reoccurring theme. Provide clarity on what your expectations are around performance and give constructive feedback along the way. So it's not just telling people what they need to learn, but it's really being clear on why it matters and how they're doing with respect to your expectations. And then reskilling, map skills to careers or new paths, help individuals see sort of that ramp to other opportunities and make the connections for them. I really believe in leaders as being those strong connectors of opportunities for the employees within their organizations. Reskilling is a shared responsibility. I would say this with respect to any reskilling or career or growth and development efforts. It's not HR's responsibility. Each individual needs to own their own career, and leaders play an important role in helping individuals identify where it is that they want to learn and grow. Get clear on what's required now and what will be in the future. A lot of what Cheryl talked about gives you the process for that. But you really don't want to reskill towards a foggy future. So crystallizing on what is required now and in the future will be helpful. Think about skill adjacency when you hire. It might not be that an individual who is always in a particular role is the perfect candidate for the future. So look at applicable skills. Individuals who have a willingness to learn and learn quickly can be another way of looking at how you want to hire given the way things that are rapidly changing. And then last but not least, make development a priority. We know it's important and it sounds like an easy thing to do. Time is always tight. There are always competing demands, but finding ways to keep development top of mind is going to be critical. And then last but not least, as we wrap up here, we fully recognize that we put a lot in these slides, human-centric approach and data and processes and steps. So I wanted to land on what I think is a simple but hopefully meaningful quote: education is not filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. Because for me, this really synthesizes the reframe that we want to do around reskilling and upskilling, not as something that you only do to fill a deficiency, you're not good enough, we're thinking of replacing you, but really changing the conversation so that it is much more about the lighting of a fire, getting people excited and engaged about how they can grow and learn and develop. We absolutely feel the pressure of the changing world around us and the skills that changing world demands and requires. But bringing our people along, getting them excited, creating a culture of learning and growth is a surefire way to take all of the good steps and strategic approach that Cheryl spoke about and combining it with what we know is ultimately going to fuel this effort, which is the skills, the knowledge, and at the risk of being a little soft, the heart of the people that are parts of our organization, the best part of our organization. So with that, I know we've left just a little bit of time, Cheryl, for questions at the end. I don't know if you've seen some come up in the chat that we want to tackle, but why don't I go ahead and open it up for that?
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to answer a really great question from Carlin here about how to get an initiative like this off the ground and being kind of the sole HR person for their organization. So you have got to have that business case. Why do we need to do this? Is it to stay relevant? Is it because this new technology is here and we want to use it? Or is it a strategic direction our organization is going? So, really understanding where the leaders are. Anytime we go into a change effort, the first thing we do is get alignment among the leaders and those key stakeholders that are going to have overall influence of this effort. Are they on board? Do they see the benefit? If they don't see the benefit, there's no not going to be any adoption here. And so we've got to make sure that they're aligned, and that can take some time. So we need a key sponsor that's going to drive this, one like the CEO or the COO or someone who has that impact and influence over their peers and then over the organization. So it really starts from the top to say, what are we doing? And then how are we going to bring the organization along? I love Becky, and I've heard it several times, the what's in it for me, the with them. How are we going to share the benefit? It's not just to keep your job. That doesn't really inspire excitement from people, but that's more of a stick as opposed to a carrot. What are you going to get out of this? How is it going to help you stay more engaged and feel more satisfaction in your role? So helping bring them on board is a great way to do it. But I would start with that leadership, the overall vision, and a very strong business case for why we need something like this.
Great, thank you. I think we had another question come in. Let me just see if, Cheryl, as I was wrapping up, was there another one that came in that you think we should try and tackle here?
Well, I think it would be valuable to talk a little bit about the industries that are most impacted in the roles as you're thinking about, is this something I need to be super worried about here? And there are a couple of industries that I would highlight. Definitely technology, software development is they're driving this. They're at the front end of it. Media and content creation have got to be continuously on the cutting edge of technology and where we're going as a whole. Financial services, because of the sheer amount of data and capability that's available for graphing and preparing and bringing in insights, that industry is highly impacted. Some of the roles that are very much impacted, any customer service, any roles looking at this data and administrative roles, the way of working is changing significantly. Those that are a little less impacted are those that are really using complex thought and decision making that really needs that individual influence as to the decisions that are being made. Now, they can take the data that different AI tools can help support, but they've got to analyze that data. Any roles that are very heavy on the physical or dexterity, AI can't replace us yet. It can't replace that extreme dexterity and the physicality of it. Machinery and manufacturing, absolutely. We're seeing roles that are were at one time very manual, now using various computers. They're having to use technology a lot more to be able to do their role. And that's where reskilling comes in. We're not upskilling them, we're reskilling them on a capability that they didn't necessarily possess before. They're having to use machinery and analyzing computers and things like that, where before it was very manual. So that's a bit of a shift when I said that the manual aspect, but it's really around the dexterity. That's something that we haven't been able to replace yet.
Yeah, that's
I'm
great.
not the one doing it, but
and then I think there's just one other, knowing that we're coming right up against the top of the hour, there's some good conversation happening between Carlin and Becky as well, who are asking, how do you shift to that perspective around another, reskilling and upskilling effort? And I think a lot of what's being said in the chat, I would absolutely endorse and have shared, I think, since that comment popped in there, which is, to involve your people in that upskilling and reskilling strategy, and to, certainly encourage those conversations in the context of larger growth and development and creating a culture of continuous learning. So I think that that perspective starts before an upskilling or reskilling agenda comes into play. In other words, encouraging conversations around growth and development, equipping your leaders with the confidence and competence that they need to engage in career conversations, to understand what's important to their people, where do they want to learn and grow. So I think the seeds of that need to be planted planted and hopefully are planted long before a formal upskilling and reskilling effort comes in. But I do think, couching this in the context of growth and development and helping people see what is in it for them and not just what's in it for the organization will be incredibly important. So thanks for encouraging that conversation in the chat. And with that, I think we are a minute over. I'm not sure if we'll turn it over to our host, but for my part, I wanted to say thank you for spending the time with us today. And we really appreciate the conversation, your willingness to participate, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Cheryl, for that great information. And thank you, everyone on the audience, for attending today's webinar. Once you leave today's event, you'll receive a short survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate if you could complete that and provide your feedback. You'll also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view today's recording, as well as the slide deck from today's presentation. On behalf of GP Strategies and our presenters, thank you again for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.